Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we're so glad to have you here. Governor Mikie Sherrill has given New Jersey Transit a tight deadline: deliver a plan by early May to improve the daily rider experience and show real results by June 22nd. The executive order calls for cleaner stations and buses, better accessibility, stronger public safety, and a much more user-friendly digital experience. But is it realistic? Standing by is John Wisniewski, former chairman of the State Assembly Transportation Committee. First, though, New Jersey voters are still saying no to casino expansion outside Atlantic City, and the numbers haven't budged in more than a decade. That's according to the latest FDU poll from Fairleigh Dickinson University. At the same time, there's overwhelming support for letting residents install small plug-in solar panels on their balconies to cut electricity bills. Joining us now is Dan Cassino, executive director of the FDU Poll. Dan, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, can you tell our viewers a little bit about what it is that you do at FDU with the polling there?
Sure. So FDU Poll has been around for 25 years now, and this is really all about trying to make electoral democracy work. The people in Trenton and the people nationally don't really know what voters want. They have this very skewed idea of what voters want based on what they hear on the golf course or what they hear in fundraisers. And our job is to make a direct connection between the voters and the elected officials. And we know it works. I get lots of calls from public officials upset that it turned out the stuff they thought was popular is not actually that popular, or vice versa. So it really is all about that sort of democracy.
Right. And it's not just about the races. It's about policy. It's about different issues of public interest.
Look, honestly, polling elections is the least important thing we do because I run a poll and I have an idea of what's going on, but I find out exactly who won the election exactly when everyone else does on election night. And that's the one time when we actually get outside data that says, oh, well, here's who actually won. And that's great, and that's what people like to read about. But that is the least important thing we do. Most important thing really is this sort of issue polling, like the stuff we're talking about today.
All right, so let's talk about the latest poll is showing opposition to casino expansion outside Atlantic City, and that remains steady at about almost 49–50%. People who support it, about 44%. So this is something that we talked about, that was actually put to a vote 10 years ago. Why is public opinion on this issue? It has been really stable for more than a decade.
Yeah, we've been asking this question dating back to at least 2009, and public opinion just hasn't moved very much in that time. We're looking at like 49% opposition now. It was like 48–49% opposition in 2015 and in 2016. It just hasn't moved very much. And the reason is that nothing has changed as far as voters are concerned. Older voters are the most opposed, largely because they remember the promises made after Atlantic City, when they said, we're going to change the state constitution just this once to allow casino gambling just in Atlantic City, nowhere else. And among younger voters, they actually are much more apathetic. They don't see the benefit because younger people, when they're gambling online. So actually having casino there doesn't really matter. What has changed is the opening of new casinos in New York City that we're expecting in some of the boroughs. We're expecting casinos to open there. The casino that was slated to open in Times Square is not going to happen. But casino operators in New Jersey are feeling the heat, saying we're going to face increased competition, we're going to lose revenue. So we have to build more casinos to make that revenue up. And that matters a lot to the people who run casinos, people who want to run casinos, but it doesn't really matter very much to voters. When this came up for a vote 10 years ago, the public was 77–23 against. It was just a ridiculously lopsided outcome. And we haven't seen public opinion change since then. There's no reason to believe we get a different outcome if we're voting on this again now.
So the numbers are almost identical to what you found back in 2014, 2016, when that referendum was overwhelmingly defeated. So, really, this is very deeply rooted in the attitudes and keeping casinos limited to Atlantic City. So can you talk a little bit about those deeply held beliefs? And are they necessarily right, wrong, or is it just what people believe?
Look, there are people who have a moral objection to casino gambling, and there was a reason that it was limited to just Atlantic City. And there's a reason in the United States overall that it was very, very limited, mostly to Native American-run casinos for decades. But that prohibition on gambling, kind of that idea that, well, gambling's bad, we're going to allow it a little bit with like the lottery or Native American casinos just on the margins. that's really fallen away in the last couple of years. So I'm not sure this is reflecting a moral objection to gambling, because the moral objection, the moral view of gambling has really changed over the past decade, while views of gambling, views of casino operation have not changed. I think for me, the most telling statistic in here is when we look at the region, like where people are most opposed to. And the place where people are most opposed to opening new casinos are around Atlantic City. Obviously, they don't want the competition, but also in the places where the new casinos would open. We're talking around Monmouth Park or around the Meadowlands. The people in Bergen County are more opposed to a new casino than anybody else. And they're the ones in theory who would benefit from the increased revenue, but they don't want the traffic. They don't want that in their backyard. So there's some NIMBYism going on here, but people just don't want this casino. And the people who like casinos, they've already got plenty of options. They are going to Pennsylvania, they're going to New York. They don't see a reason to have big new casinos opening up in New Jersey.
Yeah, and again, that split between those 65 and older, and then the younger voters, who are both saying no, we don't want it, but for very, very different reasons. Can you just talk a little bit about that phenomenon?
Yeah, and they're also gambling for different reasons. Older voters, when they are gambling, and they are like one group most likely to actually be doing in-person casino gambling, they do it as a social thing. So it's actually more prevalent among older women. They get on the bus, they go with all their friends, or they meet people down in Atlantic City. They're doing it. So that's a social activity for them. They don't necessarily see a benefit to having brand new casinos. And again, they really older voters oppose this because they do remember what happened in the past. We also see young voters just don't care about casino gambling. They see no reason to do it. They don't see any glamour. Remember, it used to be you think about casino gambling, that's like James Bond, and
Mhm.
playing Baccarat in Monaco. And that's not what it really looks like. So there's that kind of allure of casino gambling that still attaches itself to maybe some older voters. Then younger voters don't see that at all. Gambling is something that's almost a little bit trashy as far as they're concerned because that's what they've been exposed to during their lives.
Well, and also what we see is in Atlantic City, just in the past 20 years, you've really seen Atlantic City, America's playground. It used to be and the boardwalk was beautiful, bustling, and now so much is closed. Casinos are empty. Maybe they're undergoing renovations or they're being repurposed. Some have been demolished. I mean, how much of it is the town? Is it a city issue or the location, or is crime a factor? Is it more people are just staying home? I mean, how much of that, but again, it used to be this, you think about the song Under the Boardwalk, in Atlantic City. It was beautiful.
The underlying issue here, and this is something facing not just Atlantic City, but every casino in the country and really in the world, is that there is a limited population of people who like to go and spend a lot of money on gambling. There's just not that many of those people. And as you build more casinos in the US and worldwide, we've built lots and lots of new casinos. We have about the same number of people who want to go and spend a lot of money at the casinos. So there's less revenue coming to each casino. And it gets worse because the way to attract those big spenders is to have the most glamorous possible casino. So you make your overhead costs much, much higher for every new casino you build. And the overall revenue goes down. So you're taking the same amount of revenue, splitting it over more and more and more casinos. And as a result, every casino winds up doing worse. So there's really no economic argument to be made for this. And I think for residents, it's very hard to say we need more casinos when they look at what's going on in Atlantic City and go, well, what it doesn't you're working there, so why would building more actually wind up helping? Now, again, it would be very beneficial to people at Monmouth Park or people running the Meadowlands. They really think they need a casino to stay in business because they think they can get a bigger slice of that pie. But the pie is not getting bigger, and opening more casinos just means that everyone gets a smaller piece.
78% of New Jersey voters support allowing small plug-in balcony solar panels. This is something that you polled to lower electricity bills. And oh my goodness, anybody who's opening up their electric bill right now, whew, that hurts. So, can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to look into this? And again, a balcony solar panel. What is this
Yeah.
telling you?
So this is actually a bill in the state legislature. It's actually very popular among state legislatures around the country right now as people around the country are trying to figure out how to lower electricity bills for consumers. And this is not a new crazy idea. These are widely available in Europe. A couple million of them operating in Germany right now. You can buy them at IKEA. They cost 300 or 400 bucks. And it's been really opening up solar power to people in cities and people in apartments who can't necessarily install it themselves or don't want to pay tens of thousands of dollars to have rooftop solar installed. So these bills are very popular. We've seen some states, like Utah was the first, have already passed bills allowing for these solar panels. And we find we've done a bunch of polling on energy in this poll and in previous polls. And we find is anything that looks like it can bring down electricity prices is really, really popular. People
Yeah.
want something that can bring down electricity prices and something that can bring it down quickly. And the faster, the better. And this it doesn't get faster than this, right? Literally, you put it up in your porch and then you plug it into the wall, and your electricity bill's down by between 5 and 10%. This is easy. It's used elsewhere. I will say that PSEG and other power companies in New Jersey are opposed to this. They're worried about safety issues. They're worried consumers are going to shock themselves. If you unplug your toaster and then you touch the plug, then nothing happens. But since it's general electricity, if you unplug it and then you touch the plug, you can get a shock from it. And the bills, like the past news have said, we need to get certification from underwriter laboratories or other outside groups to certify the safe before we put them in place. But this is kind of a slam dunk for the New Jersey State Legislature if they want to go ahead and do it. Again, opposition from the utility companies, but we might think, well, they don't really want anything that's going to cut down money they're charging people.
And this is something that is supported across the aisle, right? 80% among Democrats, 68% among Republicans. You don't always see that getting a bill that both Republicans and Democrats agree on. It's really kind of rare that it cuts across party lines like that. Is it not?
What's interesting is we've been actually seeing that pattern with almost every energy question we ask. So we asked, for instance, about support for more natural gas plants on the theory that they can be built up faster. And yeah, Democrats like a little less than Republicans, but everyone supports it. Nuclear plants. Yeah, Republicans a little more than Democrats, but everyone supports it. The only time we don't see that is when it gets into renewables as a general category, where Republicans don't support it, but Democrats do. But generally on energy, this is bipartisan. PSEG, JCPL, they're not sending you different bills for Democrats and Republicans. Everyone's bill has gone up, and everyone is looking for a solution.
Yeah, very, very expensive. Dan Cassino, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. But before I let you go, is it possible that we would see a potential constitutional amendment on the casino expansion this coming November?
Yes, there has been push, especially from representatives in North Jersey, trying to push this. They've been facing strict opposition from South Jersey, especially people who represent there around the casinos, saying, "Look, we can't have this. It's going to hurt our casinos." And honestly, I think our polling is helping with those South Jersey Democrats trying to block the vote on this. There's a thought, yeah, we should have another vote on this, but nobody wants to go ahead and have the vote if we're going to get the same outcome that we did 10 years ago.
All right, Dan Cassino, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us from FDU or Fairleigh Dickinson University. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Governor Mikie Sherrill is giving New Jersey Transit a tight deadline. Submit an improvement plan by early May and show real results by June 22nd. The executive order demands cleaner stations, better accessibility, stronger safety, and friendlier digital experience. But is that realistic? Joining us now is John Wisniewski, former chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee, to talk about that. John, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the governor's executive order giving New Jersey these deadlines, you think is a tall order to fill. Can you tell us why?
Well, it is a tall order. I'm surprised that her predecessor or predecessors never really took this route because it's long overdue. We all know that New Jersey Transit can do better. And I think what Governor Sherrill is saying is I know you can do better. Let's get it done. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that New Jersey Transit used to routinely win national awards for being one of the best statewide transit systems in the country. We want to get back to that. And I think what she has outlined is modest, but I think steps that will be noticeable by the riding public.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that order. So it focuses on cleaner stations and bus stops, greater accessibility, public safety, improving that, and a better digital experience. Which of these areas do you think will be hardest for New Jersey Transit to deliver on quickly?
Well, it's a big system, right? It stretches from, Broad Street, Newark Penn, all the way down to Atlantic City and over to Trenton. There are lots of stations with escalators and elevators and infrastructure that needs to be kept clean. I think that's the biggest challenge because it's a big system that requires a lot of manpower. And, there's always historically been a reluctance to add to that manpower.
Yeah. Well, and also, you've talked about the real change isn't just about a commitment from New Jersey Transit, but money, actual funding. Does the executive order provide that? Does it address the money needed to make these meaningful improvements for the average commuter?
Well, executive orders can only really express an opinion about existing laws, existing statute. And so the governor can't bring more funding through an executive order. That's going to be part of the budget that gets adopted by July 1 of this year. And that's long been a major issue for New Jersey Transit in having a repeatable, dedicated funding source. Right now, one of the largest sources of money going to New Jersey Transit is from the New Jersey Turnpike. That hundreds of millions of dollars a year are going to support it, which is a good idea. But that alone is not long term going to be enough to make the long term noticeable and permanent changes that the governor is talking about.
Right. So it's a long-term permanent, but again, you have commuters. They've been complaining for a long time about late trains, late buses, rude employees, poor communication, dirty facilities, and the governor has given these deadlines of June. How much realistically can be fixed in the next 60 to 90 days?
Well, I think that's really going to. I wish she hadn't made it such a short deadline
Mhm.
because that's very. It's a big list, right? It's a big plan,
Mhm.
and I wish she had a longer time frame to make it a little easier for the commissioner of transportation and those under her, the president of New Jersey Transit, Chris Clory, and all of those folks that are working within the organization to get together to come up with a plan to make this start being a reality. I
Well,
don't think there's anybody who takes New Jersey Transit that doesn't want to see this. I also think, however, there's a fair amount of skepticism because unfortunately in New Jersey, people have heard this before.
well, let's talk a little bit about New Jersey Transit's leadership. They say, and they continue to say, progress has been made in recent years, but yeah, more needs to be done. So, from your perspective as a former transportation committee chair, how much do you think has actually improved, and how much remains the same? Because it's a process.
It is, and I guess, in fairness to, Chris Calorie and the Commissioner of Transportation, as I said earlier, it's a big system. So they are working on, for instance, the clouded windows that are in the rail cars, makes it really just it seems like they're dirty when they're not, they're just oxidized, but, they are doing that. But there's so many to replace that it's going to take time to get to see that. Making sure for instance, that they have enough engineers, right? Somebody calls in sick, an engineer calls in sick, a train operator, you run the risk of having that train canceled that morning. And if you're depending on it to get to work on time, say you work in Manhattan or maybe you're taking the train to Newark, that canceled train is going to put your entire day in disarray.
Oh yeah, the domino effect there. When it comes to Governor Sherrill's approach, some say Governor Sherrill's military background kind of or could be playing a part here, and could even perhaps help her hold New Jersey Transit to a higher standard. Do you think that approach makes a difference, or is this more for lack of a better words, an unfunded mandate?
Let's take the second part first.
Okay.
There needs to be a better level of funding. So, in one sense, coming up with a plan is not an unfunded mandate, but having the money to implement the changes, station cleanliness, making sure rail cars are maintained properly, the digital changes that are necessary, that's all going to require funding. So, that is really now on the table of the speaker and Senate president to find that money to make this a reality. To your first part of the question, I do think that her leadership style has been informed by two things: her experience serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. I think that there's a lot of good lessons learned by her there that she can make part of New Jersey government. But I also think the downside is that not everybody else in New Jersey, whether it's transit or DOT or anywhere else, has that same kind of training. And so while I think it's good, she's got to bring that culture with her. She's got to make that change so that the organizations are responding in kind. And that is a very big order.
Well, and you're somebody who's been involved in New Jersey transportation issues for decades. If you were advising the governor, what would you be telling her? What meaningful, lasting improvements at New Jersey transit, does she need to be talking about and doing that goes beyond this executive order?
Well, I think fundamentally, for anybody who wants to rely on New Jersey Transit, whether it's bus or rail, it's reliability. It is an experience that people want to know that the bus, the train, is going to be clean, it's going to be on time, it's going to be a pleasant experience. And that's something that New Jersey Transit has fallen behind on in recent years. And under Chris Clory's leadership and the commissioner's leadership, hopefully we can get back to where we need to be. But that's number one. Number two, if she was asking for my advice, I would have suggested maybe a little bit more time to come up with this plan. I would have, instead of just having virtual public input sessions, I would have some in person input sessions. And then I would also make sure one extra element of this plan should be identification of a reliable, repeatable funding source other than the fare box, reliable and repeatable funding source that New Jersey Transit can rely on this year, next year, 5 years from now. That's been one of the major uh, distractions for New Jersey Transit. It can't really plan into the future because it doesn't know if it's going to have the money to plan into the future.
And are people changing the ways they travel? Are fewer people using public transportation or more going to their cars? Or more people, perhaps leaning on it because of all the tolls and fees and congestion pricing when you get into New York? Because so many people do use the trains to commute into New York back and forth.
Well, that's a great question. During the pandemic, there was this fall off. People were just staying at home, working from home. And that still, to a certain degree, informs the levels of ridership that New Jersey Transit has or any transportation agency because just not as many people are going into the office every day. So the need for transportation like that has fallen off a bit. But then let's look at what's going on today. Gasoline prices are at a ridiculous all-time high. There's really no clear idea when those might moderate. And so commuting is now looking like a much better alternative for people. Let's seize on that opportunity, right? The gas prices are not something the governor of New Jersey can control. It's nothing she or her administration can do about it. But what she can do is what she's doing now, is finding a way to make the commuting experience better. Let's convince more people that this is worth the effort, that it's reliable, that it's enjoyable, that it's going to be a pleasant experience. And we can, in that way, make New Jersey Transit the success that it once was.
I mean, the bottom line is that the cost certainly does, is the reason why a lot of people choose it. But I've got a daughter who will often come back and forth, but she doesn't feel safe traveling by herself. Again, she's noticed a decline in the past 4 years since she started college and how the train experience used to be to what it is now. So there are a lot of things that really are factoring in. It's like, you know what, I'll just pay a little extra in the gas or I'll pay, the toll for safety alone.
Right, right. And that certainly goes to one of the elements that the governor is calling for is that not only does it have to be a pleasant experience, meaning clean trains, you can see out the windows and they're on time, but that in all aspects of your commute, whether it's walking into the station late at night or early in the morning or being on a train, that you feel safe, that you don't have to worry that you're going to be harassed or bothered or there are going to be unruly people. I think that, again, is great. We need to have a plan on how all of that's going to happen, but we also have to recognize that in a system as big as New Jersey Transit, having enough, let's say, patrol officers that are going to be riding the trains and buses, patrolling the stations, that is probably going to require an increase in manpower, not just having a new plan, but actually having people who can implement that plan. And then you come back again to the issue of funding. Where's the money going to come from? And I hope that the legislature can do that. I know that it's long been an issue. Going back to when I was in the legislature, People, from a policy standpoint, don't always appreciate the sense that funding New Jersey Transit helps in so many areas for our economy, for our road network. It is a investment that pays big dividends for New Jersey.
Yep. Just final thoughts here. Do you feel optimistic if you were giving a message to those New Jersey Transit riders who are frustrated and skeptical that anything's going to change this time?
I feel optimistic. We have a new governor who has made it one of her priorities to improve the experience that commuters are having. She retained Chris Calori as the chief executive officer of New Jersey Transit, which I think sends a lot of support that the governor is really behind this organization and making that choice. And so I think there's an opportunity to be optimistic. The devil's always in the details. Let's see what the plan produces. But I am hopeful right now that this means bigger and better things for New Jersey Transit as it moves forward.
All right, John Wisniewski, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me on.
And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.